Okay, now that you guys have learned quite a bit of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, now we're going to turn our attention to actually deploying your code to the web. So we're going to set up and configure a Flask app. So I want you to imagine a restaurant. The HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are like the ingredients and recipes for the dishes that the restaurant serves. The ingredients, the HTML, make up the structure of the dish. The recipes, CSS, determine the presentation and appearance. And the special techniques, JavaScript, add interactive elements and unique flavors to the dish. In this analogy, Flask is like a chef who prepares and serves the dishes based on the recipes or the code. When the customer or the web user arrives at the restaurant or your website, they place an order, make an HTTP request, and the chef, Flask, receives the order, prepares the dish according to the provided ingredients and recipes, and serves it to the customer, or in other words, sends the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to the user's browser. In the context of a survey application that we've been putting together, Flask helps to receive and store the survey responses, manage authentication, and display the survey results. It simplifies the process of combining the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code with back-end logic, making it easier for you guys to build and deploy your web application. All right, so the first thing I want you guys to do is actually open up a file browser. I'm using a Raspberry Pi here, but if you're using a Mac laptop, you can just go to the file browser. So I'm going to open up the file browser here, and I am going to go to our projects, and I'm going to create a folder here called My Flask App. Okay, I'm going to open up a terminal, actually cd to that directory. So our projects. Okay, so the first thing I want you guys to do is create a virtual environment. And we're creating a virtual environment so you don't mess with the Python that's running on this computer. Okay, so you're going to type the command python3-mvenv mvenv to create a virtual environment in this directory. We're going to activate the environment by typing source, the name of the directory, which is not created, and then bin, and then activate. Okay, and you can see here that we're using the venv environment. So now if we install modules, it'll install it locally in this virtual environment, and it won't mess with the Python modules that are necessary for the operating system. All right, so the next thing to do is install the Python modules that we need in this virtual environment. We're going to say pip install Flask SQL alchemy and Flask SQL alchemy. Okay, I'm going to take a couple minutes for you. I'm going to speed this up. All right, now this is all. What I want you to do is open up Visual Studio. So I'm going to minimize this. And on my machine, Visual Studio is here. It might be somewhere else on your machine. And in Visual Studio, to open the particular, I want you to open up the folder that we created. Go here, you can actually click here to open folder at the front here as well. So you can click here, or you can go up here and then go to folder. So I'm going to go to our projects, my Flask app, press OK. Now here in Visual Studio, I am going to create a folder for our code. So I'm going to say, click the button here for code, or for a folder, and call this code. And I'm going to create a couple files here. First one is going to be app.py, which will be our Python Flask app. We'll type a couple things here. All right, so we're going to start importing some things to make our Flask app run. So we'll say from Flask, import Flask, add render template. Request is our classes from the Flask app. So you also need to say from Flask SQL alchemy, import SQL alchemy. All right, and now we need to create a instance of the Flask app. We'll name it Flask, or we'll name it app to underscores at the beginning and end of the word name. Okay, now we need to configure our database. We are going to use an SQLite database for this. So config in the SQL alchemy. And then the name of this is going to be SQLite 3 responses.db. Okay, and then app.config SQL alchemy track modifications false. Right, I should want to make this full screen and make this a little bit larger. Okay, so now we're going to create the database to give it an app. All right, so we need a class for the responses to actually create our database. Here we go, class response db model. All right, so this class is going to have a ID, a name, an age, and a feedback. You can think of this table as like a spreadsheet with columns and rows, and these are the columns. Each entry is going to have an ID. This is going to be created automatically by the database. It'll be an integer. You can also be the primary key. You don't have to know what the primary key is right now, but it's important for when you have more than one table. In this case, our app is just going to have one table. It should be equal to. All right, so like I said, we're going to say name, db column, db string, any characters, nullable equals false. So it can't be empty. And we are going to get the age in our sample survey to be column, to be enter nullable. Again, it's going to be false. Then we are going to get some feedback. Text is the type of data we are going to save here. Again, null false. Right, so that's going to be our database table. I also need to create a method here. We're just going to just return the name using an f string. Self.name. Okay, you can actually create the database. You can say db.create poll, and it will use the table definitions that we use right here. Once we run the code to create the database with these 4 columns which will make the database ready for users to use our web form and store data in it. Right. So we need to create some routes for our app. For when people visit our app. So I'm going to say app routes, and this will just be the /route, which is just the beginning of the website. We're going to call this index, which is the often name of the beginning of a website. It's also sometimes called home. We are going to use a separate file to render this web page. So we're going to say render template index HTML. We will write that HTML later. All right. Next, we need a route for after they submit the survey. So we're going to say app.rounds. Call this submit. Methods here are going to be posts, and that's it. So I'm going to define a function here called submit, and we are going to get the name when they submit from their form. We are going to get their age, and we are going to get their feedback. Start to graph a response to add to our database. Name equals name, age equals age, feedback. So we're using the same names in our HTML as we are in our database, but this is the database and this is the HTML. So the HTML is being saved to the database, the HTML from the form rather. All right, so now we need to open up a DB session, a database session. We're going to add the response, and then we are going to commit that change to our database. And after that, the last thing we're going to do is return a bit of text. Thank you for your feedback. All right. Finally, what we are going to do is create a bit of code at the bottom of this for when this is ran individually, which is the way that we're going to run it, as opposed to import it by another program. You'll see what I mean later. So after this is imported, we are going to do app.run, which will run this app. Okay. And we're setting debug to true. All right, now we need to create this index.html template. So we're going to go back over here and in code, select code, and then we're going to create a new folder called templates. All right, and in templates, we are going to create a file called index.html. All right, so and this will be a simple survey. It won't be as complex as the surveys we've created before. You can minimize this now. So you will say inside of Visual Studio, you can actually create a quick template of HTML just by putting an exclamation point and pressing enter. It'll give you a quick body. So I suggest you do that so you don't have to type as much. You will change the name here to simple survey. You're going to add some styles. Say form, you want a width of 300 pixels. You want a margin of the full. Target the input and text area for some styles as well. All right, so you're going to say display block. We want to the width of 100%, the margin bottom of 10 pixels. All right, so we're just going to create a very simple form. There's an H1 tag, survey, and say Flask. Name is the survey form. The action that we want to happen once it's submitted is to go to /submit. If you remember, that is the route that we created earlier in our Flask app. And now we're going to say method is going to be post because that's what our Flask app is expecting. And then when submit, we are going to actually execute some JavaScript, and we will write later. Okay. So that is our form. Now I need to actually create the input and the labels. And label for main, which is saying we have input type text. This is required. This will be used later on in validation. Another label for the age. Ethan inputs type. I'm going to say this has to be a number. The name of this is going to be age. And no, this is required. Okay. And then finally, label for feedback. Set feedback. Input type. We can use a text area for text area, feedback, and this is also going to be required. Okay. All right. So that's the end of the form. We just now need a submit button. So we're going to say input type equals submit button. We'll just say submit. All right. Finally, we need to write some validation JavaScript code, and we'll do that at the bottom here. All right. So the function that we mentioned up here, we need to create function validate form. And I'm going to grab the name from the document and you grab the value. We're going to grab the age that they enter into the form. We are going to grab the feedback. Yeah. Now that we have these things, we are going to validate that they actually entered something. So we're going to say name, trim, to trim any white spaces off the end of the name, and then check. And we're going to check whether it's empty. Do the same thing for the trim any white spaces, and check to see if it's empty. And then finally for the feedback, remember, in JavaScript, you need 3 equal signs to check whether something is true or not, or something is equal. All right, so this basically says we're going to trim white spaces off of name and then see if it's empty, or see if age is empty, or if feedback is empty. So if any of these are empty, we are going to create an alert. It's going to say all fields are required. Okay, so then we're going to return false. Do one more check here to make sure that a number is put in for the age. So F is, let's see, F the age. So we're going to see if it's not a number, if age is not a number, or if age is less than 0, or if the age is greater than 120, which is likely for a human. We are going to say, we're going to create an alert. The alert is going to say, please enter a valid age between 0 and 120. Okay, and then we're going to return false. Okay, and that's the end of our JavaScript for this. All right, so now that we're finished with our HTML template, I'm going to make sure we save it here, and I'm going to close this, and we're finished with our app as well. Now we need to test it to make sure that we don't have any errors anywhere. So go down here, make sure that you're using your virtual environment, the Python here. So if you click here, it should say your virtual environment as the recommended. So click on that, make sure you're using your virtual environment, and then press Control and tilde. Tilde is next to the 1 to open up a terminal inside of here without having to open it, go somewhere else. I want you to activate the virtual environment just like before. We're going to say source venv, then activate. Now we're going to run the app. So we're going to say Python 3, and then actually into the code directory. So C into the code directory, and now type in Python 3 app py. And we have an error here. Where's our error? Oh, yes. There should be 2 equal signs. So save that, fix that, see if we have any other errors. Okay, we have another error. Let's see. This saying, a typo. So this should be 1L for SQLite. Save that again. Hopefully there are no more errors. Okay, we have another error. Okay, this error is complaining about the app context. So what we're going to do is actually move this. I'll move this line down here. And we're going to create the database down here and say with app context. And save it and try it one more time. Little silly errors here. That should be methods, not method. All right, so here you can put more than one method. This is actually a list, as you can see, because of the brackets. But there's a list of only one thing because we only put posts in there. So save that change. Make sure it says methods there, and then I'm going to try to run it again. Okay. Was that 4 times the charm? Okay, so now you can go to a browser, or you can just click follow the link here, and it should open up a browser. Okay, and there's our simple form. All right, so I'm going to type in my name. Remember, see where it opened up the browser to that address. So if you click on the link doesn't work, you just open up a browser and then go to the address that's running off your computer. All right, and then we will submit. We got an error, method not allowed. Okay, so the app is running, but there's something wrong somewhere. All right, so this error seems to indicate there's something wrong with our template. So the way that we're submitting to the application that we created. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. I'm going to close this browser, go back to Visual Studio Code, and then let's open up our HTML template. All right, so let's check to see if there are any errors in here. Most obvious place is here in the form, how it's submitting. That's spelled wrong, so that should be method. And what else? Feedback is spelled wrong here. Feedback. Let's see if there's any other issues. Actually, since this is a number, there shouldn't be a trim here. Let's save this. Can close the template. Down here in the terminal, press Control-C to stop the app, and then we're going to run it again. And then again here, you can hover over this and then click follow link to follow link. Let's try this one more time. Feedback. And then submit, and then we got app works. All right, the last thing we're going to do is actually set up a route to display all the information submitted to our app. And when you actually deploy this, you probably want to put a password on this page so it's not open to the internet. All right, so I'm going to close the browser. Down here, I'm going to stop the app by doing Control-C. And what we're going to do first is actually create the template for the route and then create the route last. So here in the templates, call it results.html. And collapse that. Remember, you can use Emmet to create the skeleton of a document here. We call this server results, style, body, flat family, Arial, sans, serif. And I'm going to just a table for these results. You have to set up a style for it with 100%, border, collapse, say margin, bottom 20 pixels, table head, and the table, so border handles, solid padding, it's going to be 8 pixels. Text aligned. That is my baby daughter who just woke up. Apparently is very talkative right now. Background. We are going to make class called dashboard just to display some statistics at the top of our results page. Justify content. Margin is going to be 20 pixels. Border at the bottom is 20 pixels. Width is 30%. Order pixel, solid, and color CCC. Padding is going to be 16 pixel, and an error there. Pixel line is going to be center. All right, so now we have to actually make the HTML. So down here in the body, put a heading here, H1 heading. So results. The other thing, then we can say in VS Code, you can say dot and then the class name, in this case, dashboard, and it'll create the div for us that we need. Okay, I'm going to say dot and the class name. In this case, it's going to be dashboard item, create the div for me. All right, so now I'm going to say H2, head, get the total response. Okay, so this requires a little bit of explanation. The reason we keep calling these templates is because these are being used by the Flask app. Now, the index that we created is pretty straightforward, and it looks like regular HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. But this right here is actually a placeholder for Flask. So Flask will pull the total responses from the database, and it will put it in here before it sends this HTML file to the user. So that's why this is a template. This is called the Jinja templating language, and we can put things like loops and if statements using Jinja inside of our HTML here, or inside of our template. Okay, so paragraph here, or say the total responses, and we're going to create another dashboard item. So we're going to say the dashboard item, and then this is going to be the average age. Put one more dashboard item, unique names. Go back here. Average. This is going to be unique names. Okay, so Flask will actually put the numbers in here as it updates dynamically from the database. So whenever we go to the result page, whenever we get new results, all this dashboard information will be updated. All right, so now let's create a table with all of our information, all the data. Table, and then tr, table header, the name, the age. We want the feedback. Those will be the columns of our table on our HTML page. So that's the head. Down here's the body of the table. And we're going to use more Jinja here so that the body dynamically updates as new entries get added to our database. So we use a for loop here for responses, to tr, and then we're going to actually do the responses. Table data, response.name, and feedback. That is the end of the for loop here in Jinja. But unlike Python and in JavaScript, we actually need to say when we're ending the for loop. So we're going to say end for. And that's it for our template. We're going to save it. Okay, so now we need to set up this route for that template. So we're going to say app route, and we are going to get results, and then create a function called results, all the responses. Okay, we're going to basically get all the responses. We're going to do a little bit of calculations here so we can supply the information for our dashboard. So we're going to say total responses equals the length of responses for each age around, and then going to sum response age for responses. And responses divided by total responses. We're going to round that to one decimal point. So what we're doing here is just creating a list comprehension. Instead of saving this out to another list and then doing math, the list comprehension lets you do it all in one line. This list comprehension will return a list of all the ages. And instead of saving it into a list and then summing it up, we're just going to sum it right here, then divide it by the total responses, and then we will round it to one decimal point. List comprehensions allow you to do a lot of things really quickly in one line rather than having several lines of code. All right, so that'll give us the average age. The next thing we need to get is we're going to count the unique names. So we're going to say unique names equals the length of the set of comprehension here. We're going to say response for responses. Okay. And if you remember from Python, sets can only have one copy. Unlike a list, you could have, say, 10 fives in a list. A set, you can only have one copy of a value in a set. So this will filter out all the unique names, and we'll get a length of that set. Okay. All right. Once we've done that, we can return the template. We're gonna render the template, and then we are going to send the template all the information that it needs to render. So we're going to say results HTML, and there we say responses is going to be equal to responses, and total responses is going to be equal to total responses. Average is just going to be equal to average. Okay, now we got to run this app, and assuming we don't have any errors for the new results page that we created, either errors here in the route or errors on our template, we should see results. So go down here to the console and run again. Hover over this and follow the link. Go to I'm actually going to add another name here. I'm actually going to use a different name. It's my middle name, which I'm going to put a different age. Put 10. We have that works. Now we're going to change this to results. The results route. For that sound. I'm not sure. Let's go exit out of this. and stop the app. Do we want to save this? We didn't. Yeah, it's not saved. Okay, now that it's saved, let me run it. And instead of putting in a third one, say results. So we get response names not defined. Okay, so there might be an issue with our results template. Actually, you know what? There's an issue with the app. All right, so let's close this. And down here, stop the app. And then here, I should say, response. This should say this as well. Responses, last issue, save, and then run again. Open up a browser. Now we are going to go to results. See if it loads this time. It's saying that there's an issue with response again. Oh, you know what? It's spelled wrong there as well at the beginning of the thing. All right, so close this. Okay, and then go back to our app. Responses. Okay, save, run the app again, go to /results, see if there's else, and there it is. All right, so we have 2 responses. Average age is 25.5 because those 2 things. The unique names doesn't seem to be working. So let's go back here. All right, and open up our results template. Make sure we spelt everything right here. So up here, unique names is what the template is expecting. That is how we spelled it here. Unique names. How do we spell it over here? You know what? We did not include it. That's why it's not working. All right, so we need to actually add that so that it's being sent over to the template. So I'm going to go here and we're going to say niche names equals unique. Save this. We actually don't have to restart the app. It's going to just reload the app from the save. If we go back to the browser, go back up here and open a new browser and then check the results. Now we have 2 unique names. Okay, that's pretty much it. Now all we need to do is do a cleanup of our code. All right, to clean up our code a little bit, what we're going to do first is pull our static elements out of the templates. So here, we're going to create another folder. Static, we are going to create 2 more folders. One called CSS and another one called JS for JavaScript. Inside of CSS, we're going to create a file called styles.css. And inside of JavaScript, we're going to create a file called scripts.js. Okay, let's open up our HTML template and double click and open up the results template as well. And we're going to move the CSS from here, put it inside of our new CSS styles file. And we're going to cut the CSS out of here and put it inside and save our styles. So now that we have all the styles in here to double check, yeah, we can close this and move the JavaScript as well. So we are going to cut the JavaScript from the index and save. Now we can reduce the redundancies in our 2 templates more by creating another file. It might seem crazy to create a 3rd file to make less redundancies, but there is a bunch of things that are repeated in these 2 files. So what we're going to do is actually create a file called base. Our templates, base.html. Use the emmet to fill this out, and then we're going to use some Chinga here. All of our templates will extend this base template. So we're going to change the title. Here we're going to say, all right, so we will create block title, and we'll just have a default title and And now we need to actually include the style sheets that was created. So we can create a link. The relationship to this file is that it's style sheet, and we need an href from the code here. So we're going to use the URL static, and then we're going to the file name is equal to css/styles.css. And down here in our body, a little bit more Django code, block content. So we'll pull this in from our other templates, and then this will be the end of the block. And then finally, we need to have the script. We're just going to be very similar URL for static file name. It's going to be equal to script.js. Okay, so that's our base template that all the other templates are going to pull from. So I'm going to save this, close that, and now we can update our templates to remove the code that we don't need. So this is redundant because it's in our base, and we'll just say at the top here, this template extends base.html. We say the title of this simple block. The block content starts here, block content, it ends here, and block. So as you can see, this file is now a lot shorter because it's pulling in a bunch of stuff from the base. Okay, so save this, close our index, now do the same to our results page. So don't need all this. Actually, what I'm going to do is copy some of this stuff from index so we don't have to do typing. We're going to remove all this, and we're going to this at the bottom, here, end of our blocks, and copy this. This will be the top of our block. Just change this to surveys. And now this template is a lot smaller as well. Save this, make sure HTML is saved. We're going to stop our app. And if we don't have any errors, we open this. Since we do have some errors here, let's see what this is about. Okay, so it looks like there's something wrong with the base template here. Okay, so let's close this, stop the app, open up the base template. It seems to be right here where the JavaScript is. The closing parentheses is in here. Just like we have the closing parentheses up here for the CSS, we need it there for the JavaScript. All right, so save that, run our app again. I'll link the template error. Seems to be still an issue with that base template. Close this back here. Oh, yes, and I also need to close it up here as well because this is the Chinga. Okay, code, save this. Well, third time is the charm with these templates. Add it up. Okay. All right, so it just say 16, submit it. Now let's check our results. This looks like it's working except for the styles aren't being applied. And yeah, the styles aren't being applied. Let's do a quick inspection here. Yeah, there is a bug, I think. It is going to the right place, static CSS, but I think spelled styles wrong here. Make an adjustment. Stop the app. STYLES. Over here, spell wrong, YTYLES. Okay, so save that. Now, let's run it one more time. Okay, our styles look good. 5. Okay, and we're going to check the results. Looks good. 3 unique names, as you can see down here. This is repeated, so that's not unique. Got the average up here, and we have all the feedbacks. All right, so that's pretty much the end. What I want you to do now is deploy an app similar to this using your more complicated JavaScript, CSS, and HTML survey. And the next lesson, I'll show you how to secure this results page so not anyone on the internet can look at the results of your survey. All right, get to work.